Now, my first guest, who I can look at him,
Me too.
and for some reason get the giggles. As you know, he's an Emmy Award-winning
Wimpy looks skimpy.
Well, you see, I'm fat and you're ugly, but I can diet.
performer. On Tuesday night, May 25th, he's hosting a special along with you.
It's 11:30 at night, and America is getting ready for bed. But before they turn off their TVs, they tune in to watch one man who ruled the night for 30 whole years. Johnny Carson wasn't just a talk show host. He was the king of late-night television, and everyone knew it. Every single night, the biggest stars in Hollywood would sit in that famous chair, hoping to make Johnny laugh. Some succeeded, but most didn't. You see, Johnny wasn't easy to impress. He had seen it all, heard every joke, and met every type of celebrity you could imagine. But there were 9 special guests who broke through his tough exterior and touched something deep inside him. These weren't always the biggest names or the most famous people. They were something much more valuable. They were the guests who reminded Johnny why he loved doing television in the first place. They made him laugh when he thought he had heard every joke. They surprised him when he thought nothing could surprise him anymore. Tonight, we're going to reveal Johnny Carson's secret list of his 9 all-time favorite guests. These are the people who didn't just appear on The Tonight Show. They became part of Johnny's heart. And once you understand why he loved them so much, you'll see these legendary performers in a completely new way. Let's start with the woman who could make Johnny lose control, and he absolutely loved it when she did. When Lucille Ball walked through those curtains, everything changed. Johnny's whole body would relax, his eyes would light up, and even the musicians in the band would sit up straighter. Lucy didn't come on the show like most guests, nervous and trying to impress the famous host. No, she entered like a hurricane that everyone had been secretly waiting for. Her laugh was incredible. It was big, warm, and a little bit wild, because once Lucy started laughing, nobody knew what might happen next. Johnny loved having control over his show, but with Lucy, he loved losing that control even more. During the commercial breaks, when the cameras stopped rolling, Lucy would turn the whole studio into her playground. She would pretend to balance on cables, make funny faces at the guy holding the cue cards, or act out a fake fall so perfectly that the camera operators would almost drop their equipment. The cameras might stop recording, but Lucy never stopped performing. She believed that if there were people around with beating hearts, there was always a show to put on. Johnny really admired this about her. It reminded him of the early days of television, when making people laugh was more important than following a script perfectly. When they were on camera together, Lucy could change from telling a story about a terrible rehearsal to doing a physical comedy bit so quickly that Johnny would forget what question he was going to ask next. But he didn't mind at all. Watching Lucy work was like watching magic happen. Her comedy was exciting enough to feel real, but warm enough to feel safe. Lucy had perfect timing, but she also had something even better. She had instinct. If a joke needed quiet space to work, she would let the silence do its job. If a moment needed energy, she would bring the thunder. What made Lucy even more special to Johnny wasn't just her amazing talent. It was how much she cared about everyone around her. After they finished filming, Lucy would stick around. She would learn the names of all the workers. She would thank the lighting crew for making her red hair look good under the bright lights. She would tell the stage manager that he ran a better operation than any movie director she had ever worked with. She would sign napkins for young interns and even encourage a nervous researcher to try doing stand-up comedy. Johnny saw all of this kindness, and he respected it more than he ever said out loud. When Lucy was on the show, their conversations felt like jazz music. Johnny would start with a basic rhythm, and Lucy would play along until the whole studio was shaking with laughter. He didn't try to compete with her or be funnier than her. He just smiled and let her take the spotlight. When the audience applauded and the sound rolled through the studio like ocean waves, Johnny would look at the crowd with a boyish smile that seemed to say, "This is exactly why I love doing this job." Lucy didn't just make Johnny laugh. She made him feel free to be himself. And when she finally left the set, With her bright red hair blazing and mischief still crackling in the air, Carson would sit back down behind his desk, take a deep breath, and quietly enjoy the rarest feeling in television. Pure joy that didn't need any editing to be perfect. Now let's talk about the master of one-liners who could trade jokes with Johnny like they were old friends having a friendly boxing match. When Bob Hope visited The Tonight Show, Johnny didn't prepare regular interview questions. Instead, he prepared for battle. A comedy battle. He knew exactly what was coming. Bob would throw back a perfect counterpunch to any joke, add his own twist, and then add another twist until the audience was laughing so hard they could barely breathe. Hope's one-liners felt like they had been carved from stone, not just written on paper. He would wait just the right amount of time, tilt his head slightly, and deliver the punchline with the confidence of someone who had tested that same joke in hundreds of different places and had never failed to get a laugh. Johnny loved this kind of efficiency. No wasted words, no rambling. Hope would sit down, cross his leg, and the two of them would trade jokes like old professionals who knew all the rules and all the shortcuts. Johnny would set up a clean, easy topic, politics, golf, or Hollywood gossip, and then watch Hope drive the joke all the way home. The trick wasn't surprising the audience. It was pure craftsmanship. Hope didn't have to reach for his jokes or struggle to find them. He pulled them from a well that he had been filling with great material for decades. Before they started filming, the atmosphere was always relaxed and friendly. Hope liked to arrive early so he could swap golf stories with Johnny, the kind of stories that would later become comedy bits once the cameras started rolling. Johnny really appreciated being treated like an equal, not just as a doorway to reach an audience. That respect meant a lot to him. Many guests came to the show just for the spotlight and the fame. Hope showed up because he genuinely enjoyed the challenge of making people laugh. When they were on camera together, their chemistry was instant and perfect. Johnny would throw out a simple setup question like, "How's the tour going?" And Hope would answer with a smooth path to a punchline, then spin off into another joke about airplane food, then pivot to a funny insult about his own performance. Johnny's eyes would flash with that grateful, mischievous look that seemed to say, "There it is. Perfect." He didn't need to top Hope's jokes or compete with him. He just needed to set up the next pitch so Hope could hit another home run. Hope's humor wasn't mean-spirited, and it wasn't soft either. It was like clean, sharp steel. He could tease Johnny without hurting his feelings, make fun of a politician without sounding bitter, and joke about being famous without pretending he didn't love the attention. That balance between being sharp but warm fit perfectly with Carson's style. Johnny wanted laughter that could travel anywhere, that families could enjoy together without anyone having to change the channel or cover their ears. Backstage, Hope always remembered people's names. He would shake hands with the guy who handled the props, wave at the sound technician, and deliver a quick joke to the stage manager that felt like a generous tip. Johnny noticed this old-school politeness and courtesy, which was a value he rarely talked about out loud, but always measured people by. When their segment ended, there was no overly emotional goodbye, just the mutual nod of two craftsmen who had successfully landed the plane. As the band played them off the air, Johnny would glance at Hope with quiet admiration, the kind of respect you only give to someone who still loves their work as much as you love yours. With Bob Hope on the show, The Tonight Show felt exactly like what Johnny wanted it to be. A smart, generous prize fight where the only thing that got knocked out, it was the punchline. Next, let's meet the master of timing who could make a single pause worth more than 1,000 words. Jack Benny didn't need to make a grand entrance onto the stage. He simply drifted onto it, with no rush and no fancy moves, just a slow, deliberate presence that seemed to tell the entire room to slow down and breathe with him. When Benny appeared, Carson would sit up a little straighter in his chair. He knew the jokes would eventually come, but first, there would be something much more valuable: the weight of perfect timing. With Jack Benny, that timing was everything. He used silence like a musical instrument, a quick glance toward the audience, a tiny turn of his head, a raised eyebrow that somehow said everything and nothing at the same time. These small movements were his magic. Johnny loved that level of control. He was pretty good at timing himself, but Benny's timing moved like a clock that you couldn't hear, only feel deep in your bones. A joke that would be completely ordinary in someone else's hands became unforgettable because Benny would stretch it out, making it last until the laughter had absolutely no choice but to arrive right on schedule. When Johnny was sitting on the couch next to him, he would pitch Benny an easy setup question, and then, complete stillness. Benny wouldn't hurry to answer. He would let the audience lean forward in their seats, let the band members settle into complete quiet, let the cameras seem to hold their breath in anticipation. When Benny finally delivered his answer, the release of tension was bigger and better than any punchline could have been on its own. Carson would watch these mechanics work like a student sitting in the back row of a master class. He wasn't trying to add his own jokes or compete. He was studying the invisible space around the humor, learning how silence could be just as powerful as words. Even backstage, Benny's precision never stopped. He would ask a stagehand to lower a stool by just 1 inch. Not for his comfort, but because it would help the rhythm of his performance. He would read through the cue cards for Johnny's monologue and quietly suggest cutting out a single word so that the timing would land more cleanly. He didn't talk about timing as some abstract theory or concept. Instead, he would carefully adjust everything in the room until perfect timing became absolutely inevitable. Johnny respected this approach deeply. Plenty of stars could be funny when they tried hard enough, but very few people could build an entire environment where comedy simply had to happen, whether you wanted it to or not. Benny's whole persona, patient, polite, a little bit vain, and famously cheap with money, worked like the frame of a building. He could hang any joke on that framework because the audience already knew the type of character he was playing. When Jack Benny paused during a joke, people would automatically fill in that gap with what they expected him to be thinking. That kind of partnership between a performer and their audience fascinated Johnny. It represented trust that had been earned over many years of performing, and it could all be expressed in a single heartbeat of perfect quiet. During commercial breaks, Benny didn't try to perform for attention or keep entertaining people. Instead, he conserved his energy carefully. A small nod to the camera operator, a gentle grin for the makeup artist, a soft, "How's your evening going?" to the stage manager. He was saving up his energy so that when the cameras rolled again, his next moment of silence would carry real weight and meaning. Johnny admitted to his close friends that whenever he slowed down his own monologue or let a laugh breathe naturally, he was tipping his hat to Jack Benny. He wasn't copying Benny's style, but he was honoring what Benny had taught him. Because Jack Benny showed Johnny something that was both simple and incredibly rare in show business. If you truly respect your audience, you give them time to think and feel. And if you can master that time, you can own any laugh without ever having to raise your voice or try too hard. Now let's talk about the woman whose voice could change the temperature of an entire room the moment she started to sing. When Ella Fitzgerald performed on The Tonight Show, something magical happened to everyone in that studio. The band members would suddenly play with more precision. The audience would lean forward in their chairs, and Johnny's whole posture would shift from being a host trying to entertain people to being a listener who was completely captivated. He didn't interrupt her. He didn't make jokes, and he didn't try to add his own comments. He simply watched and listened. Ella didn't come to the show to dazzle people with flashy tricks or gimmicks. She came to tell the truth through perfect music. Her entrances were always modest and understated. There was no grand flourish, no wink at the camera for attention, just a polite nod to the band, a quick, genuine smile at Johnny, and then that first musical phrase would float out, round, effortless, and beautiful, like it had been waiting in the air for her voice to find it and bring it to life. Carson loved precision in all its forms, and Ella's precision wasn't cold or mechanical like a robot. It was deeply human and full of emotion. Every single note she sang carried a complete story. Every breath she took felt intentional and meaningful. When she would slip into one of her famous scat singing runs, where she would use her voice like an instrument, the band would respond like old friends who were finishing each other's sentences. Johnny lived for that kind of craftsmanship and skill. Nothing was wasted, and everything was earned through years of hard work and practice. But what made Ella even more special was what happened when she wasn't performing. Backstage, the myth and legend would shrink away, and you could see the real person underneath all the fame. Ella would thank the sound engineer for keeping the audio mix clean and balanced. She would compliment the makeup artist on their light, gentle touch. She would ask the ST, take hand how their week was going, and you could tell that she really meant it and cared about the answer. There was no entourage of people blocking the hallways or making demands. There were no orders being barked across the floor at assistants. If a young intern nervously approached her with a program they wanted her to sign, Ella would take the pen with both hands, as if that moment belonged to the intern, not to her. She would give them her complete attention, making them feel like the most important person in the room. Johnny noticed all of these small acts of kindness. In a business that was shaped by huge egos and selfish behavior, Ella made humility look like a genuine superpower. When she sat on the couch next to Johnny for their interview, she would speak softly about life on the road, about the musicians who had taught her to listen carefully before she opened her mouth to sing, and about audiences who didn't need fireworks or special effects to feel a sense of wonder and magic. Johnny rarely pressed her with hard questions or tried to create drama. He didn't need to, because her music had already said everything that needed to be said. When the applause would finally fade away, and the studio would become quiet again, Johnny would exhale deeply, almost as if he felt relieved that the show had just been reminded of what live television could accomplish when it wasn't trying too hard to be impressive. What placed Ella Fitzgerald on Johnny's private list of favorite guests wasn't just her incredible talent, though that was certainly part of it. It was the way her talent showed respect for everyone in the room. She never tried to overpower the band or chase after applause like a desperate performer. Instead, she built a comfortable space where the audience could come closer to the music and feel safe. In that space, Johnny felt completely at ease. There was no sense of competition, no need for him to try to be cleverer than the moment required. There were just two professionals quietly honoring the same craft that they both loved. When Ella would leave the stage after her performance, the silence that followed wasn't empty or awkward. It was full of warmth, full of grace, and full of the feeling that something honest and real had just happened that didn't require any explanation or analysis. Johnny would straighten his note cards, glance toward the camera, and smile with the kind of calm satisfaction that you simply cannot fake or manufacture. With Ella Fitzgerald on his show, The Tonight Show felt less like television and more like music itself, structured, generous, and completely true. Let's move on to the charming rascal who could turn any planned show into a delightful mess, and Johnny loved every chaotic minute of it. Dean Martin didn't walk onto The Tonight Show set like a normal guest. He sauntered in with a loose tie, a cocktail glass in his hand, and a mischievous grin that promised the audience that trouble was on the way. Johnny knew exactly what that grin meant. Their carefully planned show was about to fly right out the window, and he absolutely loved it when that happened. Dean wasn't polished and perfect like Jack Benny, and he wasn't careful and respectful like Ella Fitzgerald. Instead, Dean Martin thrived in the beautiful mess of spontaneous entertainment. He would slouch down in his chair, interrupt Johnny right in the middle of a sentence with a half-sung line from a popular song, or tease Ed McMahon until the entire audience was doubled over with laughter. Johnny, who usually guarded his show's format and structure very carefully, would suddenly become completely relaxed when Dean was around. With Dean Martin on the show, nothing felt scripted or rehearsed. Instead, it felt like two old friends were just swapping stories in a neighborhood bar that happened to have millions of people watching them through their television screens. What Johnny truly admired about Dean was his amazing ability to turn complete chaos into pure charm. When most guests would ramble on and bore the crowd, Dean's ramblings somehow became the entertainment itself. He would stumble over a punchline, pause for a moment, give that famous smirk of his, and then somehow manage to land the joke even harder than if he had delivered it perfectly the first time. The secret to Dean's success was his unshakable confidence. Dean didn't mind looking a little foolish or making mistakes because he knew that his natural magnetism and charm could carry any room, no matter what happened. That relaxed, easygoing attitude would pull Johnny along with him like a gentle current. Their conversations together weren't about rehearsed lines or prepared material. It was pure jazz, unpredictable, risky, and completely alive. Even backstage, Dean kept that same wonderful energy going. He would wink at the camera crew members, slip a sincere compliment to the band leader, or raise an imaginary glass to toast the floor manager just for fun. Johnny respected that generous spirit immensely. It wasn't arrogance or showing off. It was generosity wrapped up in playful mischief. For Johnny Carson, Dean Martin wasn't just a talented singer or a funny comedian. He was a living reminder that television didn't always have to be perfect and polished to be entertaining. Sometimes it just had to be fun and spontaneous. Every single time Dean Martin left the stage, Johnny would lean back in his chair with the satisfied grin of a man who had just been reminded not to take himself too seriously, and that was a lesson worth more than any perfectly executed interview. Now let's meet the movie star, whose genuine heart could make the toughest host in television break down and cry on live TV. Jimmy Stewart didn't need a flashy entrance or a dramatic introduction. He would simply walk out slowly, with his shoulders slightly stooped in that familiar, humble way, and his characteristic drawling voice would already be softening all the hard edges in the room. For Johnny Carson, who prized composure and quick wit above almost everything else, Jimmy Stewart brought something much rarer and more valuable: complete, honest sincerity. It wasn't just that Jimmy was a Maasai, the movie star who had appeared in some of the greatest films ever made. What made him special was that he was genuinely authentic, unpolished in the best possible way, and deeply human in a world that was built entirely on artificial polish and fake smiles. Johnny absolutely adored the way Jimmy told stories. He never rushed through them or tried to get to the punchline as quickly as possible. Jimmy would start with a hesitant "well," and then let the entire audience lean forward in their seats, waiting to hear what he would say next. Whether he was talking about a neighbor from his small hometown or sharing a memory from his time serving in the army during World War II, every story would land with real heart and genuine emotion. Johnny, who was usually sharp and always ready with a quick joke or witty comeback, would often find himself sitting in complete silence, just letting Jimmy's warm voice carry the entire moment. That wasn't Johnny's normal rhythm or style, but when Jimmy Stewart was talking, it felt absolutely right to just listen. The night that Jimmy Stewart read his poem about his beloved dog Bo became one of the most memorable moments in Tonight Show history. And it's one of the rare times when Carson's famous guard completely cracked and fell away. Johnny's eyes filled with tears, his voice caught in his throat, and for once, the host who was known throughout America for his perfect control showed real, raw vulnerability on live television. Later, Johnny admitted to friends and reporters that Jimmy Stewart was the most genuine man who had ever sat in that famous guest chair. It wasn't just professional respect. It was deep personal admiration for who Jimmy was as a human being. Even backstage, away from the cameras and the audience, Jimmy Stewart was no different from the man people saw on screen. He would greet every crew member with the same warmth and kindness that he showed to the television audience. He would ask the workers about their families, remember their names from previous visits, and carry himself with the natural humility of someone who had never forgotten where he came from or how he had been raised. Johnny valued this quality deeply in people. He measured guests not just by their talent or their ability to entertain, but by how they treated the people who didn't have any spotlight or fame. Jimmy Stewart passed that test effortlessly, every single time. What Johnny Carson loved most about Jimmy Stewart was that he embodied a kind of America that felt steady, reliable, and true to its values. When Jimmy was sitting in that chair, Johnny wasn't the famous host who was battling for television ratings or trying to stay ahead of his competition. Instead, he became a boy from Nebraska again, someone who was reminded of why basic decency and kindness mattered so much in the world. Jimmy Stewart didn't just charm the crowd or entertain the audience. He grounded the entire show in something real and meaningful. And for Johnny Carson, that grounding was absolutely priceless and irreplaceable. Let's talk about the gentleman comedian who made being funny look like good manners. George Burns didn't chase after the spotlight when he walked onto a stage. He brought the spotlight with him, the same way a man carries a well-worn coat that fits him perfectly. With his ever-present cigar in hand and Johnny loved that kind of elegance and sophistication. Plenty of comedians could be funny when they worked really hard at it, but George Burns made being funny feel civilized and refined. Even backstage, the myth matched the reality perfectly. George would arrive early for tapings, greet the security guard by his first name, and shake hands with the prop master as if they were business partners working on an important project together. He would gently tap a stagehand on the shoulder, whisper a quick one-liner like he was leaving a generous tip, and then keep moving with a polite nod. That small courtesy would spread throughout the entire crew like a warm feeling. By the time George actually hit his chair for the interview, the whole crew would be standing a little taller and feeling a little better about their work. Johnny always measured his guests by how the room felt when they left it, and George Burns left every room warmer and more pleasant than he found it. When they were sitting on the couch together, George treated their conversation like a graceful waltz. Johnny would offer a gentle lead with a question about life on the road, the old entertainment circuits, or the big shift from radio to television, and George would glide smoothly through his answer, telling stories that landed perfectly without any strain or effort. George never competed with the host or tried to steal the show. Instead, he collaborated beautifully. If Johnny wanted a big laugh, George would supply the perfect setup, the smooth turn, and the clean exit. If Johnny wanted a more heartfelt moment, George would lower his voice and let his memories carry the emotional weight, especially when he spoke about all the people who had helped build his career over the decades. George didn't deal in manufactured legends or fake stories. Instead, he honored the real history of entertainment with respect. Next, let's meet the bundle of pure energy who could light up an entire city block without needing to plug into anything. When Sammy Davis Jr. arrived at The Tonight Show, it felt less like a regular guest walking onto a stage and more like electricity hitting the entire building all at once. Johnny's smile would widen before Sammy even sat down in his chair, because Johnny knew exactly what was coming. Pure energy, perfect rhythm, and a kind of infectious joy that couldn't be contained by cameras, curtains, or any other boundaries. Sammy had the rare and special ability to bridge the gap between professional performance and genuine friendship. He would give warm hugs to the stagehands, throw playful jokes at the band members, and spin a quick, funny story with the makeup artist before even stepping under the bright lights. By the time Sammy reached Johnny's desk, the entire crew would be buzzing with excitement and positive energy. Johnny once said that Sammy could light up the entire city of Burbank without needing to plug into any electrical outlet. And that wasn't just a clever line, it was the absolute truth. When they were on camera together, Sammy never sat completely still. He would dance a little bit in his chair, tap out complex rhythms on the armrest with his fingers, or slip into impressions so seamless and perfect that they would leave the studio audience gasping in amazement. Sammy could move from doing a perfect Frank Sinatra impression to growling like Humphrey Bogart to mugging like Jerry Lewis, and he could do all of this within just 30 seconds. Johnny would sit back in his chair, grinning like he was a fan who had gotten the best seat in the house. Unlike some guests who needed the host to guide them and give them direction, Sammy could carry the entire room on his own energy and talent, and he would invite Johnny to ride along on that incredi. That positive effect on other people mattered much more to Johnny than television ratings or applause counts ever could. For Johnny Carson, Sammy Davis Jr. embodied everything that entertainment should feel like when it's at its very best: alive, spontaneous, and genuinely kind to everyone involved. Every single time Sammy left the stage after a performance, Johnny didn't just have a completed television show. He had a beautiful memory that would stay with him for years. And in those magical moments, The Tonight Show wasn't just a television program that people watched. It was a celebration of everything good about show business and human nature. Finally, let's meet the actress who could match Johnny wit for wit while making everyone in the room feel like family. Betty White didn't ask for space or demand attention when she walked onto a stage. She earned every bit of room she took up the very second she flashed that famous smile. When Betty walked onto Johnny's stage, the entire audience would lean forward like they were all in on some wonderful secret that was about to be shared. Johnny, who had deep respect for quick minds and clean, precise timing, would sit up straighter in his chair when he saw Betty approaching. He knew exactly what she was bringing to the show: sharp wit, fearless playfulness, and a warmth that never once felt forced or artificial. From their very first exchange of words, Betty would match Johnny beat for beat. Johnny would toss out a sly setup line, and Betty would catch it cleanly, flip it around, and send it right back with a response that would draw a longer, louder laugh than anyone in the audience had expected. The brilliance wasn't just in her punchlines, though those were always perfect. The real magic was in the complete confidence behind every word she spoke. Betty didn't try to outpace Johnny or compete with his famous quick wit. If a makeup artist apologized for having to fuss with her appearance, Betty would joke that the mirror was the real diva in the room, not her. That kindness wasn't a performance or an act she put on for show. It was simply her habit and her nature. Johnny valued that authenticity more than he valued applause numbers or television ratings. The crew absolutely loved Betty because she noticed people as individuals. She remembered their names from visit to visit. She even remembered details about their pets and their families. When a sound technician mentioned that his dog was sick, Betty would circle back on her next visit to ask how the dog was feeling. That kind of memory and care made every single person in the room feel seen and valued. Johnny, who measured people's character by how they treated the workers who never appeared on camera, never forgot Betty's consistent kindness. When they were on camera together, Betty gave Johnny complete freedom to take risks. Johnny could try a weirder tagline or a bolder aside because he trusted that Betty would catch whatever he threw and make it work beautifully. That kind of trust is incredibly rare in television, and it's even more rare when it feels this light and effortless. When the band would play them off the air and the applause would finally settle down, Johnny's grin would say everything that needed to be said. If he could have done it, he would have booked Betty White for his show every single week. With Betty White as his guest, The Tonight Show wasn't just funny and entertaining. It felt good in a way that touched people's hearts. And for Johnny Carson, making people feel good was the highest mark that any guest could possibly achieve. When you strip away all the applause signs, the cue cards, and the commercial breaks, Johnny Carson's private list of favorite guests makes perfect sense. Johnny didn't love fame for its own sake. What he truly loved was craftsmanship and genuine human connection. Lucille Ball showed him that chaos, when it's driven by a loving heart, becomes pure joy that touches everyone. Bob Hope reminded him that tight writing and clean comedy timing can feel like a friendly prize fight between two people who respect each other deeply. Jack Benny proved that silence, when it's respected and used properly, can be louder and more powerful than any punchline, teaching Johnny to let a laugh breathe naturally until the whole room leaned in together. Ella Fitzgerald brought true humility to incredible virtuosity, turning the stage into a place of listening and appreciation, rather than showing off. Dean Martin loosened all the screws, proving that comfort and natural charm can steer a television segment better than any prepared script. Jimmy Stewart gave Johnny permission to feel real emotions on the air, and to let sincerity triumph over clever games. George Burns wrapped true professionalism in old-world courtesy, making comedy feel like good manners and social grace. Sammy Davis Jr. electrified every room he entered while lifting up every single person in it. And Betty White balanced sharp wit with genuine grace, matching Johnny line for line, while making the entire crew feel like they were part of one big family. When you look at these 9 guests together, they gave Johnny Carson something he rarely talked about out loud: reassurance. They showed him that his job wasn't only about being clever or getting laughs. It was about hosting a room where kindness, perfect timing, and true generosity could win the night and touch people's hearts. When the band would play their closing music and Studio One would finally exhale after a great show, Johnny wasn't sitting there counting how many jokes had worked. Instead, he was quietly adding up all the moments that had felt completely true and genuine. In those quiet beats after a truly great segment, Johnny would straighten his note cards, glance at the camera, and know deep in his heart that the show had honored what television does best when it's working perfectly: share a real feeling that you simply cannot fake or manufacture. These 9 legendary guests didn't just entertain millions of people. They reminded Johnny Carson why he had fallen in love with show business in the first place. They showed him that television could be more than just jokes and celebrity interviews. It could be a place where real human connections happen, where kindness matters, and where genuine talent and authentic character shine brighter than any spotlight. If you grew up watching The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, you can probably feel those magical moments right in your heart as you think about them now. There was something special about watching Johnny's face light up when one of these 9 guests would surprise him or make him laugh in a way he hadn't expected. Those were the moments when television felt less like entertainment and more like spending time with friends. Johnny Carson's love for these 9 guests teaches us something important about what really matters in life. It's not about being the biggest star or making the most money or getting the most attention. It's about treating people with kindness, doing your work with genuine care and skill, and bringing joy into other people's lives. These 9 guests did all of that, and they did it so well that they earned a permanent place in the heart of the king of late-night television. So here's my question for you, and I really want to know your answer. Which guest from this list would you have wanted Johnny to book every single week if you could have made that decision? Was it Lucy's wild energy that could turn any plan upside down? Bob Hope's perfect joke craftsmanship? Jack Benny's masterful use of silence? Ella's pure musical truth? Dean's charming chaos? Jimmy's heartfelt sincerity? George's elegant class? Sammy's infectious joy? Or Betty's sharp wit wrapped in genuine warmth? And here's an even better question. What's the one clip or moment from any of these guests with Johnny Carson that you would show to someone who has never seen them together? What moment perfectly captures why Johnny loved them so much and why they became legends in the golden age of television? I want you to drop your pick in the comments right now. Tell me which of these 9 guests captured your heart the most, and if you can remember a specific moment or quote, share that too. Let's create our own list of the most magical Tonight Show moments right here in the comments section. If this deep dive into the golden age of late-night television brought back some wonderful memories or taught you something new about these incredible entertainers, please hit that like button to let me know. Your likes help other people discover stories like this one, and they mean the world to content creators like me who love sharing these amazing pieces of entertainment history. Make sure you subscribe to this channel if you want more stories about the legends who built the entertainment industry we love today. Ring that notification bell so you never miss a new video, because I've got so many more incredible stories to share with you about the golden age of television, radio, and Hollywood. And here's something exciting. If enough of you want it, I'll create a part 2 to this video. There were other guests that Johnny Carson admired and enjoyed. People who maybe didn't make his absolute top 9, but who still held special places in his heart and on his show. Tell me in the comments who you think Johnny should have added to this list, and I'll dig deep into their stories and their special relationships with the king of late night. The golden age of television gave us so many incredible moments, and Johnny Carson was right at the heart of it all, creating a space where the biggest stars, ours and the most talented people could show us who they really were. These 9 guests proved that the best entertainment comes from real people, sharing their authentic selves with the world. Thanks for taking this journey with me through Johnny Carson's most treasured memories. Until next time, keep celebrating the magic that happens when genuine talent meets authentic kindness. That's a combination that never goes out of style, and it's something we could all use a little more of in our world today.